Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into the story of a single family, a blockbuster drug, and the national crisis that it created. We're going to look at how Purdue Pharma and the Sacklers built an absolute fortune on a foundation of pain.
You know, our story doesn't start in some fancy boardroom. It starts in a huge, sprawling mental asylum. This is where the three Sackler brothers worked, and they personally administered thousands of electroshock treatments. And after seeing that kind of brutality up close, they developed this core belief, one that would build a pharmaceutical empire. That mental illness, well, it was just a chemical problem. And for every problem, there had to be a chemical solution, a pill.
And this right here, this single sentence from Arthur, the eldest brother, it just perfectly captures the philosophy that would define their company for decades. The idea was simple: deflect any blame from the product and put it squarely on the user. It's a really chilling but incredibly effective strategy that became the foundation for their entire business.
So you have to understand, before OxyContin was even a thing, there was Arthur Sackler's marketing genius. The guy didn't just sell drugs. He basically invented the playbook for modern pharmaceutical marketing. And this system, which, let's be honest, often crossed some serious ethical lines to turn drugs like Valium into household names, it would become the blueprint for everything Purdue did next.
I mean, just look at these tactics. Pioneered way back in the mid-20th century, they became standard operating procedure for the family business. Arthur literally invented modern drug marketing as we know it, using doctors as paid salesmen, creating ads with actors playing doctors, and brilliantly convincing millions of people that they needed tranquilizers just to deal with everyday anxiety.
Okay, so with Arthur's playbook firmly established, the next generation of Sacklers had a big problem on their hands. Their main painkiller, a drug called MS-Contin, was about to lose its patent protection. That meant profits were about to tank. Their solution? A brand new drug, built on that same Contin system that would go on to change America forever.
So the idea was to take oxycodone, which is a really powerful and addictive opioid, twice as strong as morphine, by the way, and make it last longer. See, the Contin system was this polymer coating that was designed to dissolve slowly, releasing the drug over 12 hours. And that was their key sales pitch: long-lasting relief. But here's the thing. The family's ambition wasn't just to sell it for severe end-of-life pain. Oh no. They wanted a blockbuster, a drug for everyone with any kind of pain, from cancer to just a common backache. And to do that, they had to convince doctors it was safe.
So how do you turn a drug like OxyContin into a billion-dollar product? Well, Purdue had to convince the world of something that just wasn't true, that it was safe and, most importantly, non-addictive. And that required a total masterclass in deception, starting with the one organization that was supposed to protect all of us.
This is where things get really shady. The whole regulatory process was completely compromised. The FDA regulator in charge, a guy named Curtis Wright, he basically co-wrote the drug's approval language with Purdue. Their executives literally camped out near his office for days. And the result was this unheard-of label, a scientifically baseless claim that became the absolute cornerstone of their entire marketing strategy.
And this was Purdue's boldest and most effective lie. Armed with that fishy FDA label, their sales reps hammered one statistic into the minds of doctors everywhere. Less than 1% of patients who took OxyContin got addicted. Less than 1%.
I mean, think about it. Doctors all across the country trusted the statistic. It was repeated in medical journals, at conferences. It sounded so legitimate, so scientific, so reassuring. But where did it actually come from?
You heard that right. One of the most destructive medical marketing campaigns in history was based on a tiny decades-old letter to the editor. It was about opioids used in a controlled hospital setting. The author himself was shocked when he found out how his little letter was being used. It was a complete and total fabrication.
So now they have their magic FDA label and their fake 1% statistic. What's next? An all-out sales blitz. They coached reps to lie, created this crazy bonus system where some reps were making more than the company's CEO and just bought influence with fancy dinners and gifts. They even funded these so-called independent groups to push their propaganda in hospitals. And this unprecedented sales campaign worked, unleashing a crisis of just unimaginable scale.
And boy, did that strategy work. It worked beyond their wildest dreams. By the year 2000, OxyContin sales had crossed $1 billion a year. But pretty soon, the devastating reality of what they'd unleashed could no longer be ignored, as reports started flooding in from all across the country.
And Purdue, they had a perverse answer for everything. When their big claim of 12-hour relief failed, which it did a lot,
Patients would go into agonizing withdrawal, a classic sign of addiction. But Purdue twisted it. They invented this concept called pseudo-addiction. The cravings, the clock watching, the desperation, they argue these weren't signs of addiction, but signs that the pain was undertreated. And the only solution? You guessed it, a higher dose.
Well, it didn't take long for people on the street to figure out the pill's fatal flaw. You could just crush it, bypass that whole time release thing, and get this massive heroin-like high all at once. A black market just exploded, pharmacies were getting robbed, crime rates soared, and in the hardest-hit towns, it just became a tragic part of life.
So what was the company's response? They went right back to Arthur's original playbook. Blame the victims. The company president, Richard Sackler, publicly called them scum of the earth. That was their public stance. Even his internal emails showed that they knew exactly how addictive their drug was and how it was being abused.
Eventually, you just can't hide something this big. With overdose deaths mounting and entire communities being destroyed, the scale of the crisis became undeniable. And this led to years and years of legal battles that finally started to expose the truth behind all the marketing.
So in 2007, Purdue gets hit with this huge fine. But internally, they just saw it as a cost of doing business, like a speeding ticket on the road to billions. That same year, OxyContin made $3 billion. The executives who pled guilty got bonuses. And then, in this just stunning act of defiance, right after the trial, the Sacklers voted to hire even more sales reps and doubled down on the very tactics they were just fined for. The real reckoning wouldn't come for another decade.
So you might be asking yourself, how can a company that made over $35 billion from one drug go bankrupt? Well, it's pretty simple. The Sacklers took the money. For years, they systematically siphoned billions of dollars out of Purdue and into their personal offshore accounts, leaving behind an empty corporate shell to face all the lawsuits while they got to keep the profits. But behind all the numbers and the legal maneuvering, this is the human cost. While the lawyers were debating finances, families that had been completely torn apart by addiction were just seeking some kind of accountability that money could never buy. This quote from a grieving mother really captures the devastation left behind by Purdue's marketing machine.
And the damage didn't even stop with OxyContin. When prescriptions finally became harder to get, millions of people were already addicted. They were forced to turn to the streets for cheaper, easier alternatives. This created a whole new wave of heroin and fentanyl overdoses. OxyContin had become the gateway.
And this is the ultimate legacy of the Sackler playbook, an ongoing public health crisis that was fueled by a business that decided to profit from pain. A crisis that started with a lie about addiction and has now spiraled into the deadliest drug epidemic in American history. You know, the Sacklers will likely remain one of the richest families in the world. The company they used is now bankrupt, but the crisis they started continues to claim lives every single day. The family name has been stripped from museums and universities, but the question of real justice, well, that remains unanswered.